Margot Carson, show me the money. And by money, I mean the weekend box office returns, baby. Now look, Super Bowl weekend is typically slow at the box office. The studios are more focused on the trailers that they're pushing out during the Super Bowl. They're not as focused on who's going to the movies because not a lot of people are. The last time a number one movie crossed 30 million over Super Bowl weekend was 2015 with Clint Eastwood's American Sniper. So it's been a decade since we've had a movie even do 30 million at the box office on Super Bowl weekend. And here's a fun fact, Joe. You know the biggest opening ever over Super Bowl weekend? The biggest opening ever over Super Bowl weekend was 2008.
Paul Blart's Mall Cop.
You know, you're kind of in the ballpark.
Okay,
was 2008's Hannah Montana and Miley Cyrus the best of both worlds concerts. It was a live concert of Hannah Montana and Miley Cyrus. Actually, probably a good strategy for Super Bowl weekend.
Yeah, that's
like,
smart.
Don't do a movie. Do something do a concert film or something.
Well, that's what the good folks over at Becoming Led Zeppelin did.
Becoming Led Zeppelin, look at that per screen.
There's like a
7,000 per
release
screen.
documentary about Led Zeppelin that came out this weekend. 360 screens with a nice cume. 7th place with a $2.6 million. Good for getting the lead out this weekend.
But overall, this was a typically slow weekend at the box office. Dogman held on to the number one spot, but it did have a pretty big drop-off, 62% drop-off. If you compare that to the the last Dave Pilkey big screen adaptation, 2017's Captain Underpants, that only had a 49% drop off in its second week. So,
that's all right though. Dogman is the ballerina to Captain Underpants' John Wick. You know, it's a spinoff, and it did admirably.
And they budgeted accordingly. It was only $40 million budget, and it's already up to $66 million worldwide. So Dogman is still really so far the big success story of the year. Coming in at second and third were the new additions, in addition to Becoming Led Zeppelin, the new additions to this week's box office: Heart, Eyes, and Love Hurts. Heart Eyes from Sony and Love Hurts from Universal. Kind of like Valentine's Day counter programming. They have rom-com elements, but one is a slasher, one is a sort of John Wick action thriller. Heart Eyes did $8.5 million on an $18 million budget, which is not bad. But if you compare it to Companion, which came out last week, similarly a sort of medium to low budget studio sort of high concept horror thing. Companion did $9.3 million on a $10 million budget. And I think that budget, there's a world of difference between $10 million and $18 million when you're talking about these kinds of movies, because the margins are really tight. The theatrical window is going to be really tight, because next week we have freaking a Marvel movie coming out, so everything that we're looking at now is going to get wiped off the face of the earth because of the Marvel movie, and we got a Paddington movie coming out. So, Hard Eyes had a really small window to do some damage at the box office, and that, I really am surprised they couldn't figure out a way to keep this thing at $10 million, because then they'd be sitting really pretty. But as it is, still a little bit of an uphill climb for this thing to see profit at an $18 million budget.
That being said, for an original piece of IP put out on Super Bowl weekend that has to compete against the other Valentine's Day genre movie for boys and girls, eating into its cume, for Hard Eyes to take home 8.5, it's not a sequel, it's not based on anything. I do think that's impressive. And I like that Sony took a chance on an original slasher IP at that 16 to 18K budget figure, but ultimately a little shy of perfect. But in these days, I think they're over at Sony saying, phew, we survived the weekend. Pretty good, Brett. Pretty good.
I believe so. They definitely did better than Universal's Love Hurts, which sadly had the same budget, $18 million budget, but only made $5.8 million opening weekend, and the bad reviews are not going to help it going into next weekend. The coming of a Marvel movie is not going to help it, like we said.
And Valentine's Day will be over.
So Love Hurts, unfortunately, is probably going to go down as a bomb, is not going to see profit, is going to lose money, which is unfortunate for Universal. But I want to talk about the biggest story of the box office over the past week to 2 weeks is not showing up here in the U.S. domestic box office. So we can wipe this U.S. domestic box office off the screen. I am talking about the incredible, the unprecedented, the historic explosion going on at the China box office, the Chinese box office. China's film market right now is off the freaking charts, Joe. We have never seen anything like it. Let's look at the details. And this is incredible because you'll remember when I was doing my 2024 box office recap, one of my big themes of 2024 was that China's box office had a big drop in 2024. They dropped 25% overall from 2023, which is a huge drop post-COVID, and they didn't have any titles show up in the worldwide top 10, maybe one at number 10, depending on how you do the numbers, but that's very unusual because they've had like usually two movies firmly in the top 10 over the last couple years. Well, they really turned the ship around, Joe, because all of this is anchored by a movie an animated sequel called Neza 2. Neza 2. It's an animated adventure movie based on a 16th century Chinese novel. The marketing made it look sort of like Moana. It's like the aquatic things going on.
Avatar Moana.
Joe, this movie's only been out for 2 weeks, and it has already grossed, in China alone, it has grossed $1 billion. In one market in 2 weeks.
The one film.
One movie.
Not the Chinese box office last week made $1 billion.
Which is also doing incredibly. We'll get to that.
You're just saying
one movie alone.
Neza 2 made $1 billion in 2 weeks.
Joe,
has any American film ever made $1 billion in 2 weeks?
This is no American film in America, in one market, in the American market, has ever made $1 billion, period.
Not Star Wars, not Marvel.
No,
not
the
Avatar.
closest one, the highest, and once again, this is just, we're looking in one market, meaning one country's box office, right?
Right.
So the most a movie has ever made in the U.S. box office, in the American box office, is Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, with $936.7 million. So almost
domestic.
Almost $1 billion over the course of its entire run. This movie's already made $1 billion in 2 weeks. 2 weeks? That's insane. It's impossible.
We drove to Santa Barbara for their film festival. Carson, book us our flights. We got to go to China and watch Neza 2.
Well, Joe, good news. It's coming out in theaters in America this week.
Yeah,
this
Wait,
weekend.
what?
Yeah, well,
all right. Well, fuck Paddington in Peru. I'm going to see Neza.
I got to see what all the fuss is about.
Fuck Paddington.
Now, it's not done either. This movie's projected to do $1.4 billion by the end of its run in China alone. And it wasn't just Neza 2. In this 1 week, Joe, January 28th to February 4th, which corresponds with the Lunar New Year holidays in China, there were 6 new releases. Okay, 6 new releases. This is just 1 week. 1 week. The first week that Neza 2 came out, right? There were 6 new releases that collectively made $1.3 billion in 1 week. In that 1 week, all right, the first week. First week, $1.3 billion. 665 of that was Neza 2's first week. But that means that the box office made an additional $650 million. And they were all like animated legacy sequels.
Because Lunar New Year, like, people get off work. Like, it's a massive thing in China. So this is sort of their, like, whatever, Memorial Day weekend or something, like, for their box office, right, Brett? Like, it's like Thanksgiving. Like, it's a big movie-going
It's a big movie-going
right?
time.
Okay,
and what they did was, I think, as an intentional way of turning around the box office and having a good start to the year, one of the box office newsletters I subscribe to described it as if, like, Hollywood released all of their tent poles for the year in 1 weekend. So if they released like Fantastic Four and Jurassic Park and Superman and Mission Impossible all in the same weekend, right? And so
because they were they trying to craft their own Barbenheimer to like inject energy into their theater going
I
public?
believe so. There's not a lot of intel on like what the strategy was or if this was coordinated.
Right.
But from the outside, it certainly seems like it was strategic and coordinated, and it worked.
Damn.
Because you had this is in 1 week. You have Detective Chinatown 1900 making $313 million.
Stop.
You have
that sounds good.
Yes, it sounds
Detective
great.
Chinatown 1900.
You have Creation of the Gods 2 Demon Force.
Stop.
Making $137 million in 1 week. You have Legend of the Condor Heroes the Gallants making $81 million in 1 week. You have Boogie Bears making $40 million in $70 million in 1 week. This is all in the same week.
It says Boonie Bears.
Boonie Bears.
The Boogie Bears.
You have Boonie Bears.
The Boogie Bears coming in. Future Reborn. That's the sixth Boogie Bears.
This is all these numbers are in the same week in the same country's box office.
And honey, you didn't
this
even
has
mention.
Never happened
you didn't
before.
even mention Operation Hadal.
Operation Hadal made $40 million. That was the bomb. $40 million.
That was the
Operation
Art House.
Adal was like, we got to go up against what?
Wait, Operation Adal was like, you're fucking me.
We have to go up against what? All those are coming out this weekend? Oh,
Okay.
my God.
Wow, that was an invigorating segment. So
Wasn't
like,
that crazy?
so what's like? Okay, so first of all, we got
I think I take a drink of water.
we got to see.
I don't know how this is possible, Joe.
We got to see Nija too.
Yeah.
I love this for China, I guess, or something, and I don't know enough about it to say anything of note other than that didn't happen last year. Whoa,
This has never happened.
That's crazy.
Here's the big question though: is are they out of gas for the rest of the year? Like, did they really release all their tentpoles at the beginning of the year?
well, you know, like part of the residual Barbenheimer thing was a lot of people remembered like, oh, I like to go to the movies. Like,
Yeah.
and I know it didn't
Yes.
save everything, but people like the movie weekends when there's energy at the movie theater, and I wonder if they gave this big injection and people in China were just kind of remembered post-COVID, like, I love going to the movies.
Yeah.
Popcorn.
Well, I hope it keeps going.
Yeah.
These movies all sound fun.
They all sound great. I want to see Nija too. So, I mean, the real question, Brett, is do you have to see Nija 1 in order to get it?
Yeah.
I'm gonna check that out on Tubi.
You know, you probably get more out of it if you've seen Nija.
I'm gonna watch Nija 1. I'm watching it tonight.